Marcus Johnson had only 3 hours to sleep each night. At 28 years old, this young single father worked as a construction worker at dawn, waiter at lunch, and night security guard until 6 in the morning, all to support his 5-year-old daughter Emma after his wife had abandoned them for a rich man. While building another luxury building in downtown Chicago, Marcus had no idea that the woman in the red dress watching him from across the street was Victoria Sterling, the richest heiress in America. He didn't know that morning she had decided to lay off half the workers to save costs. But when Victoria discovered the true story of this man who sacrificed everything for love of a little girl, her millionaire but empty life was shaken by an emotional earthquake that would forever change both their destinies. Because sometimes it takes a broken heart full of love to teach a rich but lonely soul what it truly means to live. The alarm rang at 4:30 in the morning, as it had every day for 2 years. Marcus Johnson opened his eyes in the darkness of the studio apartment he shared with his daughter Emma, feeling the weight of accumulated exhaustion. He had slept barely 3 hours, but his body had adapted to function on the bare minimum. He got up silently to avoid waking the little girl sleeping in the bed next to his, covered by the pink comforter she adored. Emma was 5.5 years old, with long brown hair that reminded him of her mother, and those big, curious eyes that were the reason Marcus found the strength to get up every morning. 2 years earlier, Sarah had left them. One morning, she had packed her bags while Emma was at daycare and Marcus at work, leaving only a cruel note. She had found Richard Sterling, a 50-year-old businessman who was rich and elegant, the opposite of Marcus. Since then, Marcus had transformed his existence into a race against time to guarantee Emma everything a little girl deserves. At 5 in the morning, he started as a construction worker for Morrison Construction, working on Chicago's most important building sites. The work was hard, but it paid well and he was good at it. He had golden hands, his colleagues said, and physical endurance that amazed even the most experienced foreman. At 1 p.m., after quickly eating a sandwich, he ran to the Garden restaurant in downtown Chicago, where he worked as a waiter until 8 in the evening. It was an elegant establishment that served businessmen and wealthy tourists. Marcus had learned to move between those tables with discretion, carrying expensive dishes to people who spent on one dinner what he earned in a week. From 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. he stayed with Emma. These were the most precious hours of his day. He picked her up from Mrs. Patricia, the 60-year-old neighbor who watched her, prepared dinner together with her, helped her with drawings, read her a bedtime story. In those moments, everything else disappeared. Fatigue, bills, loneliness. At 1 a.m., he started his third job, security guard at a department store. From 2 to 6 in the morning, he walked among shelves full of merchandise, staying awake with coffee and willpower. It was the job he hated most, but also the one that paid best for night hours. That September morning, as he prepared to go to the construction site, Marcus looked at Emma sleeping peacefully. She had the face of an angel, and he wondered for the 1,000th time if he was doing enough for her. He couldn't afford expensive toys, designer clothes, or beach vacations, but he gave her all his love, every free minute, every dollar earned. Arriving at the construction site at 6, Marcus put on his hard hat and began his day. They were building a luxury building in the Loop District, apartments that would cost millions of dollars. While mixing cement and laying bricks, Marcus imagined what it would be like to live in such a place. Emma would have her own room, full of books and toys. What Marcus didn't know was that someone was watching him that morning. From the construction site across the street, where they were building an office skyscraper, Victoria Sterling followed his every movement. She had come to lay off 20 workers and save $300,000 in construction costs. But something about that man working with such dedication and precision had caught her attention. Victoria was 27 years old, and the heiress of the Sterling Empire, one of the richest families in America. She had studied economics at Harvard, spoke 4 languages, owned homes in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and London. But she had never seen anyone work with the passion and determination of that worker across the street. Without knowing it, the destinies of Marcus and Victoria were about to intertwine in a way that would forever change their lives. Victoria Sterling stepped out of her black BMW with the elegance of someone born to command. She wore a gray suit that cost more than Marcus earned in 3 months, and that air of superiority that had been taught to her since childhood. She was used to seeing construction workers, waiters, gardeners as people who worked for her without ever truly meeting her gaze. The meeting with engineer Stephen Miller was supposed to be a formality. She had to communicate the cost cuts, immediate layoff of 20 workers, and salary reduction for everyone else. A purely economic decision, made during a meeting where they talked about numbers, not people. But as she crossed the construction site, heading to the temporary offices, Victoria heard something that made her stop. A voice softly singing a lullaby. She turned and saw Marcus, kneeling next to a concrete mixer, checking the quality of cement while humming that melody she vaguely remembered from her childhood. The approach was spontaneous. Victoria came closer, asking about that song, and Marcus, surprised to be approached by such an elegant woman, explained simply that it was a lullaby for his daughter, a 5-year-old girl named Emma, whom he proudly called the most beautiful thing in his life. Victoria nodded and headed toward the offices, but that conversation stayed with her. During the meeting with the engineer, while discussing layoffs, she kept thinking about that man singing lullabies among cement and bricks. When she asked if the workers to be laid off had families, the engineer confirmed that many of them were fathers and husbands. Back in her office, a 3,000-square-foot penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, Victoria sat at her glass desk, staring at documents without reading them. She lived in a world of numbers, budgets, investments. People were human resources, costs to optimize, variables to manage. That evening, in her 5,000-square-foot mansion in Lake Forest, Victoria dined alone as she had for months. The mahogany table could seat 12 people, but she ate in silence, served by the housekeeper, watching business news. She had everything money could buy, but had no one to share a lullaby with. Her parents had died in a plane crash when she was 20, leaving her an empire to manage, but also a loneliness that grew every year. She had had relationships with men interested in her money, friendships of convenience. She was surrounded by people but deeply alone. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about that worker who sang while working, who had a 5-year-old daughter and eyes that shined when he talked about her. She decided the next day she would return to the construction site. Meanwhile, Marcus was finishing his shift as night security guard. It was 5 in the morning, and in an hour he would have to be back at the construction site. His body demanded rest, but his mind was already focused on the day ahead, buying notebooks for Emma starting 1st grade, paying rent, finding time to take her to the doctor. He didn't know that just a few miles away, in a mansion worth more than everything he would earn in a lifetime, a very rich woman was discovering for the first time what it meant to feel interest in someone without ulterior motives. Victoria returned to the construction site the next day, but this time not for work. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, trying to blend in among the workers. She wanted to observe Marcus without being seen, to understand who this man really was, who had disturbed her thoughts. She found him during lunch break, sitting on a pile of bricks with a sandwich in hand and phone to his ear. Victoria hid behind a truck and heard the conversation that changed her heart. Marcus was talking to his daughter with a completely different voice, full of tenderness, attention, pure love. He promised her that evening they would cook her favorite spaghetti together and read the story of the brave princess. When he hung up, saying he loved her and that she was his most beautiful star, Marcus sat still staring at the photo on his phone of a smiling little girl with long brown hair. In the afternoon, Victoria did something she had never done. She followed Marcus. She discreetly tailed him to the garden restaurant, watching him quickly change and start his second work shift. She entered the establishment and asked for a table, observing him as he served with grace, despite his fatigue. When Marcus came to her table to take her order, he recognized her immediately. Victoria ordered a salad and, driven by curiosity, asked for confirmation of what she already suspected. Marcus confirmed without self-pity that he had 3 jobs: construction worker in the morning, waiter in the afternoon, night security guard at night, all to support his daughter. Victoria was speechless. This person worked 20 hours a day for a 5-year-old girl. She couldn't imagine such dedication. That evening, instead of returning to her empty mansion, Victoria followed Marcus when he went to pick up Emma from Mrs. Patricia. She hid behind a car and watched them walk home hand in hand. Emma was even more beautiful in person, talking animatedly about her day, and Marcus listened as if her words were the most important thing in the world. Victoria followed them to their apartment building in a working-class neighborhood, staying there for minutes after they disappeared into the entrance. In that family of 2 people living in a few square feet, she had seen more love than she had ever experienced in her life of luxury. Back home, Victoria couldn't eat. She wandered through the empty rooms of her mansion, looked at the illuminated pool she never used, the home theater where she watched movies alone. Everything suddenly seemed useless, cold, meaningless. She opened her computer and started researching Marcus Johnson. She discovered he had lost both parents in an accident when he was 18, that he had married Sarah Foster, that they had Emma when he was 23. She also found articles in local newspapers about the divorce, about a young mother who had abandoned husband and daughter for a rich businessman. Reading those details, Victoria felt a rage she had never experienced. That man was sacrificing his life, health, and youth for a little girl another woman had abandoned, and she was about to fire him to save a few $1,000s. She picked up the phone and called engineer Miller. The layoffs they had discussed were suspended. She wanted all personnel files in her office, and especially everything about construction worker Marcus Johnson. That night, Victoria didn't sleep. For the first time in her life, she had seen what it meant to love someone more than yourself, and she understood.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
That all her millions weren't worth the smile Emma had given her father on the sidewalk. She was about to make a decision that would forever change all 3 of their lives. Monday morning, Victoria arrived at the construction site at 6:30, an unusual hour for her who usually started her day at 9. She wore an elegant but not excessive red dress, and her heart was beating hard for what she was about to do. She found Marcus already at work, focused on checking material quality. When he saw her approaching, he seemed surprised and slightly worried. Maybe he thought he had done something wrong at the restaurant. Victoria sat on a pile of bricks, not caring that her expensive dress would get dirty. She wanted to make him a proposal, but first she had to reveal who she really was. She told him everything, that she was the owner of Sterling Holdings, one of the richest companies in America, that she owned that construction site and many others. Marcus listened incredulously, unable to connect that elegant but simple woman with one of the country's most famous heiresses. When he asked why she was telling him all this, Victoria answered with complete sincerity. In 3 days, he had taught her more about life than she had learned in 27 years. The proposal was extraordinary. Victoria wanted to hire Marcus as quality supervisor for all Sterling Holdings construction sites, $5,000 a month, normal hours from 8 to 5, free weekends, health insurance for him and Emma, and a company apartment in downtown Chicago. Marcus looked at her as if she had gone crazy. He was just a construction worker, without education or degrees. But Victoria explained that he had something more precious: field experience, knowledge of materials, and above all, a work ethic that couldn't be taught. When Marcus asked why she would do this for him, Victoria was direct. She had seen how he talked about his daughter, how much he loved her, and understood that a man willing to work 20 hours a day for a little girl was exactly the type of person her company needed. Marcus needed time to think. It was too good to be true. After 2 years of daily struggle, someone was offering him an escape, not just for himself, but for Emma. That evening, Marcus didn't go to the restaurant. He called in sick, something he had never done. Instead, he went home, took Emma, and brought her to the park. He needed to reflect, and the only place he could think clearly was watching his daughter play. If he accepted, Emma could go to a better school. They would have a bigger house. He could take her to school every morning and read to her every evening. All the normal things a father should do. But there was something that worried him. Why would a very rich woman be interested in him? What did she really want? He wasn't used to good things happening without a price. That night he called his uncle Robert, the only person he completely trusted. After hearing the whole story, Robert told him what Marcus needed to hear. His father had always taught him that when life offers an opportunity to improve, it doesn't matter where it comes from. Marcus had worked like crazy for 2 years and deserved that chance. Looking at Emma sleeping peacefully, clutching her favorite teddy bear, Marcus made the most important decision of his life. The next day, he would say yes to Victoria Sterling. Marcus's first day as quality supervisor was surreal. Victoria personally accompanied him to the office prepared for him. A bright room on the 15th floor of the Sterling Holdings skyscraper, overlooking the construction sites he now had to supervise. On the desk was a framed photo. Marcus and Emma at the park, which he didn't know when it had been taken. In the first days, Marcus felt like a fish out of water. Everyone called him engineer, even though he corrected them. He participated in meetings where enormous figures were discussed. But when it came to evaluating materials or solving practical problems, no one was as good as him. Victoria watched him from afar, seeing him gradually adapt. She was proud of her decision, but above all, fascinated to see Marcus blossom. Without the constant fatigue of 3 jobs, he was even more handsome. He smiled more, had energy to joke with colleagues, and above all, could dedicate all his free time to Emma. The company apartment in River North was a bright, tastefully furnished 2-bedroom. Emma finally had her own room, full of books and toys that Victoria had discreetly delivered. The little girl was over the moon. 3 weeks after starting the new job, Marcus called Victoria. Emma wanted to invite her to dinner to thank her. For Victoria, who in 27 years had never been invited to a family dinner, it was a moment of absolute emotion. That Sunday, she showed up with flowers for Emma and her heart beating hard. When the little girl opened the door, she threw herself around her neck, calling her Aunt Vicky, as if she had known her forever. Dinner was simple: spaghetti with tomato sauce prepared by Emma with Daddy's help, salad, and a cake they had made together. But for Victoria, it was the most beautiful evening of her life. Emma chattered non-stop, telling her about school, her friends, her drawings. Marcus smiled, seeing the 2 most important women in his life bond so easily. After dinner, while Emma showed Victoria her toys, Marcus prepared coffee. When he returned to the living room, he found Victoria sitting on the floor helping Emma build a castle with Legos. She had never played before, and Emma was teaching her with a teacher's patience. Victoria stayed until Emma fell asleep. She wanted to read the bedtime story with her, and when the little girl asked if she would come back soon, she promised yes, with teary eyes. In the living room, while Marcus tidied up the toys, Victoria helped him silently. It was a domestic atmosphere she had never experienced. When Marcus thanked her for saving their lives, Victoria understood that something irreversible had happened. She hadn't just given Marcus a job, she had found the family she didn't know she was looking for. That night, returning to her empty mansion, Victoria knew she would never be the same. She had heard Emma call her Aunt Vicky with genuine affection, had seen Marcus smile without worry, and for the first time felt part of something bigger than her money. She was falling in love not just with Marcus, but with the idea of family that he and Emma represented. 6 months after that first dinner, all three of their lives had completely changed. Victoria had sold her Lake Forest mansion and bought an apartment in the same building as Marcus and Emma, 2 floors above. Officially to be closer to work, but everyone knew the real reason. Emma had started calling her simply Vicky and considered her part of the family. Every evening after school, she went up to Victoria's apartment to do homework together. She helped her with math, read English books to her, taught her to play the piano installed especially for her. Marcus watched this bond grow with mixed emotions. He was happy to see Emma so content, but felt indebted. Victoria was giving his daughter everything he had never been able to afford. But above all, Marcus was falling in love with Victoria, and this scared him. Victoria was living the happiest period of her life. Every morning she woke up knowing she would see Marcus at work, and Emma in the afternoon. She had learned to cook, to braid hair, had discovered the pleasure of animated movies watched together on the couch on Sunday mornings. The turning point came one spring evening. Emma had gone to sleep at a classmate's house for the first time, and Marcus and Victoria found themselves alone. They had dined together, talked about everything and nothing. Then Marcus said something that had been weighing on his heart for months. He confessed he was afraid Emma would get too attached, and that he didn't want them to suffer when Victoria decided to return to her previous life. Victoria looked at him incredulously. What previous life? The one where she dined alone every evening? Where her only human relationships were business meetings? In the last 6 months, she had lived more than she had in all her 27 years. Emma had taught her to laugh. Marcus had shown her what it meant to work for something you truly love. Together they had taught her the meaning of family. Marcus confessed he was falling in love with her, and that this terrified him. She could have anyone, rich and important men. He was just a former construction worker. Victoria stopped him, explaining that he was the richest man she knew. Rich in values, love, dedication. He was the only one who had ever loved her for who she was, not for what she owned, and she kissed him. A sweet kiss, full of everything they had said and not said in the previous months. A year later, in a simple ceremony at the neighborhood church, Marcus and Victoria got married. Emma was the flower girl, proud to finally have a mom who loved her as much as her dad. Victoria legally adopted Emma, who from that day carried the surname Sterling Johnson. Marcus became vice president of Sterling Holdings, bringing his practical experience to company management. But above all three had become a true family, united by pure love and the daily choice to care for each other. On their wedding evening, while Emma slept in her new bedroom, Marcus and Victoria sat in the garden looking at the stars. Victoria thought that morning at the construction site she hadn't just found a good worker, but the man who would change her life and the little girl who would teach her to love. Marcus had found the woman who had saved him and Emma, giving them not just financial security, but a complete family. At that moment came Emma's sleepy voice from the window, asking if they couldn't sleep. They turned and saw the little girl at the window with messy hair and her teddy bear under her arm. Emma ran to them and curled up between her parents, looking at the stars together. They were truly a perfect family. Sometimes the most beautiful families aren't born from blood, but from the daily choice to love, protect, and grow together. Marcus had learned that true wealth isn't measured in money. Victoria had discovered that love is worth more than any fortune, and Emma had been lucky to grow up surrounded by both. Because in the end, the only thing that matters is having someone who loves you for who you are, not for what you own. And the three of them had found that in each other. Like if you believe true love knows no social differences. Comment which moment of the story moved you most. Share to inspire those who still believe in the power of family love. Subscribe for more stories of families born from the heart. Sometimes destiny uses work to help you find love. Sometimes those who have everything materially need those who have everything emotionally. And sometimes the most beautiful families are built by choosing to love each other every day. Because true wealth is measured in hugs, smiles, and hearts beating together.